With his PhD and millions of dollars, this 7-foot, one giant still chooses a $17 hoodie for his travels. He hates noise and just wants a simple bed after his late flight. But at the Grand Crest lobby at 11:22 p.m., his massive frame shrinks under the sneer of the manager, Preston. Preston denies him a room for security concerns, but he really just wants to serve wealthy, high-class guests. The secret owner decides to stay calm and silently observe. He begins a patient journey, facing the mean lobby staff and the cold rules of the hotel. Will this heartless system fall apart when they find out who they just kicked out? The rain hit the glass doors of the Grand Crest Hotel like small stones. Outside, the streets of Atlanta were empty and wet at this hour. Streetlights blurred into long orange streaks on the flooded pavement. A few late taxis rolled slowly past, their wipers fighting against the storm. Inside, the lobby glowed with soft gold light and cold marble floors. A giant man stepped through the revolving door at 11:22 p.m. He stood 7 feet and 1 inch tall. He weighed 324 pounds. His shoes were a massive size 23. He wore a gray hoodie. That cost him just $17. Water dripped from his sleeves onto the polished floor below him. He bent his neck low, the way he always did indoors. Tall ceilings still felt small to a man his size. He kept his shoulders curled in, trying to take up less space. This habit came from years of walking through doors built for normal men. Door frames, car seats, even airplane rows always felt too tight for him. He often joked quietly to himself that the whole world was built half-size. Tonight, though, he was too tired for jokes, even the quiet kind. His name did not matter to him tonight. He just wanted a quiet room and a soft pillow. His flight had been delayed 3 times before finally landing late. His back ached from folding himself into a coach seat for hours. He carried no fancy suitcase, only a worn black duffel bag. The zipper on, that bag had broken months ago and never got fixed. He kept telling himself he would buy a new one someday soon. Somehow, that day never quite arrived between flights and meetings. Inside that bag sat a black card that could buy this entire hotel chain. But he never touched that card unless he truly had to. He believed power should stay quiet, not loud. Loud power, he always thought, usually hid something rotten underneath it. He walked toward the front desk with slow, heavy steps. Each step from his huge shoes echoed across the empty marble lobby. The sound bounced off the high ceiling and faded into silence. Behind the desk stood a man named Preston Vance. Preston had slick black hair and a sharp gray suit. His tie was pulled tight, his shoes polished like glass. A thin gold name tag sat perfectly straight on his chest. Preston looked up and saw the giant approaching slowly. His eyes moved from the man's wet hoodie to his worn duffel bag. He noticed the small hole near the cuff of the sleeve. A small, cold smile formed on Preston's lips at once. He already decided this man did not belong in his lobby. To Preston, the Grand Crest was a temple for the wealthy and polished. Anyone who looked tired or rough simply did not fit his picture. Preston had worked 5 long years to climb up to this desk. He grew up in a small town with very little money himself. Now he wanted distance from anything that reminded him of that past. Every wrinkled jacket or worn shoe felt like a small insult to him. He believed comfort for the rich required strict gates for the poor. That belief had hardened slowly inside him, year after year, shift after shift. Tonight, this giant stranger looked exactly like the gate he wanted to close. Preston straightened his jacket and folded his hands on the counter. "Good evening," Preston said, his voice smooth but distant. "I need a room for tonight," the giant said quietly. His voice was deep but gentle, almost like a soft drum. Preston typed slowly on his keyboard, barely looking at the screen. "I'm sorry, sir. We are fully booked tonight," Preston said. The giant tilted his head slightly, studying Preston's face closely. He noticed the lobby behind Preston was almost completely empty. Only 2 other guests sat near the fireplace across the room. A reservation board glowed softly on the wall behind the desk. "The board behind you shows plenty of open rooms," the giant said calmly. Preston's smile tightened just a little at the corners. "Those rooms are reserved for our preferred guests," Preston replied. He glanced again at the giant's soaked hoodie and old sneakers. "We also have certain security standards for walk-in guests," Preston added. The giant said nothing for a moment, just watching him closely. He had heard this kind of polite cruelty many times before. It never came with shouting or with cursing. It came wrapped in soft words and quiet contempt. "I just need a bed," the giant repeated, his tone still calm. Preston shook his head slowly, almost bored by the request. "I truly am sorry, sir. Perhaps try a hotel down the street," he said. He glanced toward the door, hoping the giant would simply leave now. He had already decided in his mind how this story would end. A tired stranger turned away politely, vanishing back into the rain. No fuss, no manager call, no mark on his perfect record tonight. The giant looked at him a long moment, then nodded once. He did not argue, did not raise his voice, did not demand a manager. He simply turned away and walked toward a dark wooden bench in the corner. His big body lowered onto the bench, which creaked softly under his weight. He pulled his wet hood low over his eyes and waited in silence. Rainwater pooled slowly beneath his shoes on the cold marble floor. He closed his eyes, letting the tiredness from his flight settle over him. From his desk, Preston watched the giant settle into the shadows. He grabbed a silk cloth and wiped an invisible smudge from the counter. His face twisted slightly, as if something dirty had touched his perfect lobby. He whispered to himself, "Some people just don't belong in places like this." The giant heard every word, but did not move or react. His philosophy was simple: answer with patience, not anger. He had learned that lesson long ago, growing up poor in Newark. His mother, Lucille, often faced this same quiet disrespect at corner stores. Clerks would watch her closely, suspicious of a woman with little money. She never yelled back. She simply held her head high and walked away. Young and small back then, he used to grip her coat sleeve tightly. He remembered feeling ashamed for her, then ashamed of his own shame. Back then, he promised himself he would never make anyone feel that small. He did not know, yet that one day he would have the power to keep that promise. Money came to him later, faster than he ever expected as a young man. But the lesson from those Newark sidewalks never once left his mind. He still remembered the smell of the corner store, sharp and dusty. He still remembered the clerk's narrow eyes following his mother down each aisle. That memory stayed sharper than almost anything else from his whole childhood. The giant carried that same quiet strength inside his huge chest now. Tonight, he wanted to watch how this hotel truly treated people. Not the famous version of himself, but an ordinary tired traveler. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the lobby. Old jazz music played faintly from a hidden speaker somewhere above him. The leather of the old bench was cold against his damp clothes. Rain kept tapping the windows, steady and endless in the dark. He thought about how power means nothing if it never sees real life. A title or a fortune could not fix a broken, careless system. Only attention could do that, the kind of attention most rich men skipped. He thought briefly about flying straight home instead of staying the night. But something about this place, this lobby, this moment, held him still. Tonight, he chose to sit in the corner and simply watch. At 11:35 p.m., a side door opened near the housekeeping hallway. A tired woman pushed a heavy cart full of cleaning supplies. Her name was Clara Higgins, and she was 42 years old. Her hands were rough and cracked from strong cleaning chemicals. Her shoulders sagged from 14 straight hours on her feet. She had already cleaned 6 floors of the Grand Crest that night. Her sneakers were thin at the soles, soaked through from mop water. Clara worked 2 other jobs besides this one, just to make ends meet. Mornings she cleaned houses across town, before her daughter woke for school. Afternoons, she answered phones for a small insurance office downtown. By night she came here, dragging her tired body through one more shift. She rarely slept more than 4 hours before starting the cycle again. Her daughter, only 9 years old, did not fully understand why Mom was always gone. Clara just kept telling her, "We're building something better, baby. Just wait." She believed that, with her whole worn-out heart, even on the hardest nights. Some nights, she cried quietly in her car before walking inside for her shift. Tonight was simply one more night to push through one more shift to survive. Preston walked over and tapped his folder hard against her cart. Higgins, you're 4 minutes late for the lobby cleaning schedule, he said coldly. I'm deducting $15 from your pay this week, he added flatly. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her cleaning rag tighter. I had to call my daughter's doctor, she said softly, her voice shaking. She has a fever, and I needed to check on her, Clara explained. Preston raised one hand, cutting her off with a polished, dismissive wave. Grand Crest standards leave no room for personal excuses, he said sharply. Clara lowered her eyes and pushed her cart forward, without another word. She knew arguing with Preston never changed anything at this hotel. She had tried once before, months ago, and nearly lost her job. The giant in the corner watched the whole exchange in total silence. His eyes narrowed slightly, his jaw tightening just a little. Memories of his childhood in Newark rushed back into his mind. His mother once got scolded in public for being short on grocery money. A clerk had humiliated her in front of other shoppers that day. The giant remembered the shame on his mother's face that night. He remembered walking home, with her in total silence, holding her hand tightly. He clenched his fists slowly, then released them, breathing out slow and steady. He told himself this was not the moment to react with anger. Anger, he believed, only fed the same coldness he wanted to fight. The giant reached into his hoodie pocket, feeling the small black card inside. One word, one swipe, and this whole situation would end instantly. But that was not why he was here tonight. He wanted to understand the people running this place from the inside. He wanted to see if kindness still existed in tired, broken systems. Clara kept mopping near the lobby, tears quietly slipping down her cheeks. The smell of bleach stung her eyes, mixing with her silent crying. She wiped her face quickly with her sleeve before anyone could notice. She thought about her daughter's small body curled up under a thin blanket. She thought about the rent due in less than 10 hours now. Slowly, her mop pushed her closer to the dark corner bench. She had no idea who was sitting quietly in the shadows. She only saw a large, soaked stranger resting after a hard journey. Something in her tired heart told her to check on him anyway. Even exhausted, Clara Higgins still carried kindness inside her worn-out body. Years of hard living had not managed to crush that part of her. She paused her mop and looked toward the giant in the dark. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the tall lobby windows. Clara noticed the giant's hoodie was completely soaked through with rain. She set her mop against the wall and walked closer carefully. Sir, it's freezing outside tonight. Would you like some warm water? She asked. The giant lifted his head slightly and looked into her tired eyes. Thank you, he said softly, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. Clara hurried to the small staff break room near the back hallway. She poured warm water into a paper cup with careful, gentle hands. She also grabbed half of her own cheese sandwich from a worn bag. It was cold and plain, but it was her only meal that night. She had planned to eat the other half on her drive home. She walked back and handed both items to the giant stranger. It's not much, but it should help you warm up, she said kindly. The giant accepted the cup and sandwich with quiet, deep gratitude. You didn't have to do this, he said, his voice low and warm. Nobody should sit alone in the cold, Clara replied simply. She sat on the edge of the bench, just for a moment to rest. Her feet throbbed, with a dull, constant ache from standing all night. Quietly, she began talking about her daughter's fever back home. She mentioned the $4,200 rent payment due tomorrow morning. Her bank account, she admitted, held only $14.20. She laughed a little, a tired and bitter sound, then went quiet again. Sorry, she added quickly. You didn't ask for all my problems tonight. It's all right, the giant said. Sometimes it helps just to say it out loud. Clara looked at him for a moment, surprised by how easy he was to talk to. Most people rushed past her, without ever really seeing her at all. The giant listened closely, never interrupting, never offering pity or judgment. He simply nodded, letting her words settle deep into his chest. Respect for her quiet strength grew heavier inside him with every sentence. He thought of his own mother working long shifts just to survive. This tired woman in front of him carried that same unbreakable spirit. Neither of them noticed Preston's sharp eyes watching from across the lobby. He stood by the desk, arms crossed, watching the two of them like a hawk. Something about their quiet conversation bothered him more than he expected. In his mind, kindness toward strangers like this only invited trouble and chaos. He had built his entire career on keeping strict lines between people. Guests stayed on one side, staff stayed on the other, and strangers stayed outside. Watching Clara cross that line, even for a moment, made his jaw tighten. Preston's polished shoes clicked loudly against the marble as he approached. The sound sliced through the quiet corner like a blade. "Higgins," he snapped, his voice dripping with cold disgust. "Are you using hotel time to feed some homeless stranger?" he demanded. His words were quiet, but they carried sharp, cutting venom. Clara stood quickly, fumbling for an explanation that made any sense. "He's just a guest who needed help, Preston," she said nervously. Preston cut her off before she could finish her sentence. "Get back to the supply closet and write your resignation letter," he ordered. Clara's eyes widened, her chest tightening with sudden fear and panic. She had 2 kids at home and rent due in 9 hours. She thought of the eviction notice already pinned to her front door. Her landlord had warned her twice already, his patience clearly running out. One more missed payment, and her small family would be out on the street. Slowly, the giant rose from the wooden bench behind her. His full height stretched upward, filling the space above Preston's head. His shadow spread wide across the gold-lit lobby floor. Preston suddenly felt very small standing in front of this stranger. For 1 second, fear flickered behind his cold, polished eyes. But pride, as always, came rushing back in to cover that fear. Preston stepped back slightly, his throat tightening with sudden nervousness. But his pride quickly pushed that fear back down inside him. He lifted his radio and pressed the button hard. "We have a suspicious individual disturbing the lobby. Remove him now," he barked. Moments later, a security guard named Roy walked in slowly. Roy carried a baton on his belt, his steps cautious and unsure. He froze the instant he saw the giant's true size up close. The difference in height was simply too overwhelming to ignore. Roy's hand hovered near his baton, but never actually touched it. The giant did not move, did not clench a single fist. He stood completely still, his arms relaxed at his sides. His eyes locked steadily onto Preston's nervous, sweating face. This was his philosophy: answer with stillness, never with violence. The silence in that lobby grew heavier with every passing second. Even Roy could feel the strange pressure building in the room. Preston shifted on his feet, unsure what to do next. Clara stood frozen between fear for her job and worry for the stranger. Rain kept beating steadily against the tall glass windows outside. Somewhere down the hallway, a clock ticked loudly toward midnight. Roy had worked security at the Grand Crest for almost 6 years now. He had broken up drunk arguments, stopped a few thefts, even chased off troublemakers. But nothing in his training prepared him for a man built like this one. He glanced at Preston, silently hoping for a different order than the one given. Preston only glared back, his eyes demanding immediate action without any hesitation. Roy shifted his weight from one foot to the other, stalling for time. He had a family at home and no desire to test this giant's patience. He thought of his own son, asleep at home, waiting for him after work. Whatever happened next, he decided he would not be the one to start it. Preston's phone buzzed sharply inside his jacket pocket. He glanced down and felt his stomach drop instantly. It was a message from Wayne Brooks, the regional operations director. Wayne was coming for a surprise inspection at exactly 12:15 a.m. He wanted to check the hotel's 5-star service standards personally. Preston wiped sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. He could not let this rough-looking giant sit here during the inspection. This visit could decide his entire future at the company. A promotion, a bigger office, a bigger paycheck all hung on tonight. He had already pictured himself standing in that bigger office, signing important papers. That image alone made him desperate enough to push Clara harder than ever. He turned sharply toward Clara, his voice low and threatening. "Get him out in 10 minutes, or I call the police on you," he hissed. "I'll say you helped steal hotel property for a stranger," he added coldly. Clara's eyes filled instantly with helpless, trembling tears. She glanced at the giant, torn between her job and her conscience. She could not bear sending this tired man into the storm outside. But she also could not risk losing everything for her own children. The giant watched her struggle, his heart aching quietly for her pain. He understood completely the trap she was caught inside tonight. Poverty often forced good people into impossible, cruel decisions like this one. It was never really a choice, not a fair one anyway. It was just survival dressed up to look like a decision. He had seen his own mother face choices just as unfair years ago. She once skipped a meal so he could eat a full dinner before school. She never complained, never explained, just quietly went, without so he could have enough. Watching Clara struggle now felt like watching that same old wound reopen slowly. He wanted to step in immediately, but he held himself back one more time. He needed to see exactly how far this cruelty would stretch before stopping it. Seeing Clara hesitate, Preston's anger boiled over completely. He grabbed her mop bucket and shoved it forward roughly. Dirty water splashed across the floor and onto the giant's massive shoes. "Look what you've done. Poor people only bring filth to this place," Preston shouted. His polished mask of politeness cracked apart in an instant. Years of careful manners fell away, revealing something colder underneath. Clara dropped to her knees, desperately trying to wipe the mess away. Her rough hands scrubbed frantically at the floor near the giant's feet. The giant looked down at the woman kneeling before him in panic. Then he looked at Preston, who was breathing hard with rage. Anger rose inside the giant's chest, hot and heavy. But it did not explode into shouting or sudden violence. Instead, it settled into something far more serious and still. He bent down slowly and gently lifted Clara back to her feet. His huge hand felt warm and surprisingly careful against her skin. "You don't have to clean up his mess," he said softly. Clara looked up at him, confused and shaking from fear. Something powerful and quiet had shifted in the giant's eyes. For the first time, that night, his calm felt almost dangerous. Roy took one step back, his hand sliding completely off his baton. Even Preston, blinded by rage, felt a chill crawl up his spine. The lobby fell into a heavy, suffocating quiet for several long seconds. Rain hammered against the windows like a slow, steady warning drum. Clara wiped her eyes and stared up at the giant, still confused. She had never seen anyone hold so much anger so completely still. It scared her a little, but it also made her feel strangely safe. At exactly 12:15 a.m., the revolving glass door spun open again. Wayne Brooks stepped inside, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. Two assistants followed closely behind him, clipboards ready in hand. Preston rushed forward instantly, plastering a wide, fake smile across his face. "Mr. Brooks, good evening. I was just handling a disturbance," he said quickly. Wayne barely glanced at Preston, his eyes scanning the lobby instead. His gaze landed on the towering figure standing near the corner bench. Wayne's face suddenly drained of all its color completely. His leather briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the marble floor. The sharp sound echoed through the silent lobby like a gunshot. Preston turned, confused by Wayne's sudden, frozen expression. "Sir, is something wrong?" Preston asked nervously, his smile fading fast. Wayne did not answer him right away. He simply stared, his mouth slightly open in pure disbelief. His assistants exchanged confused glances, unsure what was happening around them. One of them quietly stepped back toward the revolving door, sensing something huge. Wayne had worked under this giant's company for almost 11 years now. He had seen photos, attended meetings, even shaken his hand once at a conference. Never once did he imagine seeing him soaked and ignored in his own lobby. His mind scrambled to understand how this disaster had happened on his watch. Wayne rushed forward and bowed his head low before the giant. His forehead nearly touched his own knees from the deep bow. "Sir, Dr. O'Neill, why are you here like this?" Wayne stammered. Preston's entire body went stiff, as if frozen solid by ice. The words "doctor" and "O'Neill" struck him like sudden lightning. He finally understood exactly who he had been mocking all night. His mind raced backward, through every cruel word he had spoken tonight. Each sentence replayed in his head, louder and more shameful than before. The giant slowly pulled back his wet hood, revealing his calm face. He did not shout, did not gloat, did not raise his voice. He simply looked straight at Preston with steady, quiet eyes. Preston felt his knees go weak beneath his expensive gray suit. Every ounce of his earlier pride evaporated in pure terror. He opened his mouth, but no words would come out. Only silence and fear filled the space where his arrogance once stood. Clara stood frozen nearby, her tired mind struggling to understand the moment. The man she had given half a sandwich to own this entire hotel. She pressed a trembling hand against her mouth in shock. The giant turned toward Wayne, his voice calm, but deeply firm. "Wayne, this hotel was never meant to run on cruelty," he said. "Preston Vance is terminated, effective immediately," he continued steadily. "Take his access cards and escort him out of this building," he ordered. Preston's legs nearly gave out beneath him at those words. He opened his mouth to beg, but Roy raised a silent hand. That single gesture crushed any hope Preston had left inside him. He walked toward the revolving door in complete, humiliated silence. The cold rain outside swallowed him the moment he stepped through. His polished shoes splashed through a puddle as he disappeared into the dark. The giant then turned gently toward Clara, who stood trembling nearby. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his black card. He handed it to Wayne, with calm, steady instructions. "Pay off Mrs. Higgins's $4,200 rent debt tonight," he said. "Starting tomorrow, she becomes head of guest services at this location," he added. Her new salary would be enough to cover rent and her daughter's medical bills. Clara's legs buckled, and tears poured freely down her exhausted face. These were not tears of fear anymore, but tears of pure relief. She bowed her head, whispering thanks to the giant who saved her family. Her voice cracked as she spoke, overwhelmed by everything happening so fast. For the first time in years, she felt the weight on her shoulders lift. Wayne stood by quietly, still too stunned to fully process the night. He kept glancing between Clara, the giant, and the puddle where Preston once stood. Slowly, he started to understand how badly this branch had been run. He made a quiet promise to himself to fix it, starting that very night. He picked his fallen briefcase off the floor, his hands still slightly shaking. "I'll make sure this never happens again, sir," Wayne said, his voice low. The giant simply nodded once, accepting the promise, without needing more words. He had learned long ago that promises spoken in fear rarely meant much. But sometimes, fear was exactly what it took to start real change. Word of that night slowly spread through the entire Grandcrest staff. Within weeks, the cold rules that once crushed tired workers disappeared completely. New training programs taught every manager to treat staff with simple respect. Late shift workers received warm meals instead of empty break rooms. A small fund was created to help staff cover sudden emergencies at home. No one had to choose between a sick child and a paycheck again. Wayne personally reviewed every manager's conduct twice a month after that night. He never wanted another Preston quietly hiding behind polished shoes and cold rules. Every front desk now kept a small list of empty rooms posted in plain sight. No guest, rich or poor, would ever again be turned away without a clear reason. Reviews of the Grandcrest slowly began mentioning warmth instead of just luxury. Word spread that this hotel finally treated everyone, staff and guests, like people. That, more than any star rating, became the Grandcrest's true reputation in the city. The lobby that once felt so cold now felt warm and welcoming. Soft lamps replaced harsh white lights near the front entrance. Clara walked those marble floors now, with her head held high. She no longer feared being humiliated over a few missed minutes. Her daughter's fever passed, and her small family slowly found stability again. She moved into a slightly bigger apartment near her daughter's school. The giant, meanwhile, slipped quietly back into the rainy Atlanta night. He pulled his wet hood low over his head once more. In his pocket, he carefully carried the half sandwich Clara had given him. He wrapped it gently, like it was something precious and rare. He smiled softly, thinking of his mother back in old Newark streets. Power, to him, was never about gold cards or fancy titles. Real power lived quietly in small moments of human kindness. He walked into the dark, rainy streets at exactly 12:45 a.m. Behind him, the Grand Crest Hotel glowed with a new kind of light. It was warmer now, softer now, built on dignity instead of fear. The giant disappeared into the storm, content with his silent, simple victory. He needed no applause, no headlines, no proof of what he did. He only needed to know that one tired woman could finally breathe easy. And somewhere in that quiet truth, he found his own kind of peace. He kept walking through the wet streets, his shadow long behind him. Rain ran down his hood, but he did not hurry his steps. He had learned long ago that good things take their time to grow. Tonight, one small act of kindness had quietly changed an entire hotel. Tomorrow, he would board another plane, wear another simple hoodie, and disappear again. Somewhere else, another tired worker might need someone to simply notice them. And he would keep showing up, silent and steady, ready to watch and listen. That was the only kind of legacy he ever truly wanted to leave behind. Months later, the Grand Crest looked like a completely different hotel inside. Staff smiled more easily, even during the slow, exhausting overnight shifts. Managers learned to ask questions before jumping straight to punishment. A small plaque appeared near the staff break room, simple and unsigned. It read only, "Dignity costs nothing. Give it freely, every single shift." Nobody knew exactly who placed it there, though a few guessed correctly. Wayne never confirmed it, but he always smiled a little when guests read it aloud. Clara often paused by that plaque before starting her rounds each evening. It reminded her of warm water, half a sandwich, and one quiet stranger. She kept a small framed photo of her daughter on her new desk. Her daughter now smiled more, slept better, and worried less about money. Clara still worked hard, but the fear that once followed her was gone. She no longer flinched every time a manager walked toward her cart. Somewhere out there, a giant man kept boarding planes in cheap, plain clothes. He kept choosing quiet corners over fancy lounges, simple meals over luxury dinners. He kept watching, listening, and waiting for moments nobody else even noticed. Not every story ended with his card or his name revealed at all, but every story carried the same quiet question underneath it. Would the world treat tired, struggling people with kindness when nobody important was watching? That night at the Grand Crest, one woman's small kindness answered that question first. And one giant's quiet patience made sure the answer finally meant something real. Far down the street, the giant ducked into an all-night diner for coffee. He sat in the back booth, hood still up, steam rising from his cup. A waitress refilled his coffee without ever looking twice at his size. She just smiled, said, "Let me know if you need anything else, hon," and walked off. She had no idea who she was serving, and that was exactly the point. He smiled to himself at the small, easy kindness of that simple moment. Not every place needed fixing tonight, and that thought brought him quiet comfort. Some kindness already existed quietly in the world, waiting to be noticed. He finished his coffee slowly, watching the rain finally start to soften outside. Tomorrow would bring another flight, another city, another quiet lobby somewhere new. For now, in that small diner booth, he simply let himself rest. Outside the window, the rain finally slowed to a quiet drizzle. The city lights blinked softly through the wet glass, calm and steady. He thought once more of his mother, of Clara, of small kindnesses passed forward. Then he finished his coffee, paid in cash, and left a generous tip. He walked back out, into the night, ready for whatever came next. Somewhere ahead, another lobby waited, another tired stranger needing to be truly seen. And the giant, quiet as always, would be ready to notice them too.